Hello everyone. So these are the lecture notes on William Shakespeare's time, the time that he lived. And so I'm going to just be going through, I'm going to be using my notes to kind of guide me here, so I can keep track of what I've said and what I need to say still. So this is the video that you are going to be using to answer the Shakespeare's World Google form. Okay, so everything that you need, all the answers that you need for that form, I'm going to be talking about on this video. Okay, so you can have this video playing in the background while your Google form is up, and then you can just listen for the answers if that works. So, all right, so let's quickly talk about William Shakespeare. He lived in 1564 to 1616, and he was born in Stratford-on-Avon, England. And England was in the middle of a Renaissance. Okay, and Renaissance means new beginning or reborn. Queen Elizabeth I was the ruling monarch at the time. So this was the Elizabethan time period, the Elizabethan era. And it was a time of national strength and wealth. And the prevailing attitude of the people at the time was that life was exciting and humans had the potential for development. Okay, so basically before this was the medieval period, and the premise in the medieval period was kind of like everyday life and life on earth was just a preparation for eternal life. And that was questioned during the Renaissance. So if you think of kind of what that would mean to just kind of be living in preparation for dying, this whole Renaissance period, when everything was kind of reborn as far as new architecture, new inventions, new just everything was just being reinvented. Okay, so new art, new school educational things. So all of these things were just kind of reinvigorated in the Renaissance, and that's because people started seeing life as meaningful. Like, we could get things done. We should make the most of it when we're here. This was a time for heroes, and because this was new to everybody, everyday people were looking for heroes to emulate or to take after. So the ideal Elizabethan man was a talented courtier, like able to court ladies well, an adventurer, a fencer, a poet, a conversationalist. He was witty, and eloquent, and he examined his own nature and causes of his own actions. So very philosophical, like kind of questioning life and why are we here and what can we do while we're here. Despite the fact that the nation was ruled by a queen, so even though there was a female as the highest position of power, women still had a lower social status than men. Okay, everyday women had a lower social status than men. Not the queen, obviously, but even though the queen is a female and the head of state is a female, okay, still women did not have the same rights. So there was a natural order that they believed in at this time, and that this isn't all that different from what we would think today. It's a hierarchy with God at the top, then humans, and then animals, and then inanimate living things like plants, and then non-living things like rocks at the bottom. So there was this hierarchy, but within the human section of that, there was another hierarchy, and this was called the Great Chain of Being. Okay, so this is what the people during Shakespeare's time, most of them believed in this Great Chain of Being. Okay, and this is royalty at the top, nobility, gentry, and then peasantry at the bottom. These were not merely social classes, but they were considered almost different species. Okay, if the chain were broken, everything was upset and everyone suffered. That's what they believed. And the chain being broken would be like if, let's say, someone from a different level of this hierarchy decided they were going to rise up against someone that was royal. Okay, so think of it that way. Now, they believed, though, that these upsets in the great chain of being were foreshadowed by signs in the stars, like astronomy, like if they saw a meteor shower, they thought that meant something was gonna disrupt the great chain of being. Unusual weather patterns, things that they couldn't really explain, they didn't know enough about, things that weren't happening all the time, and unusual animal behavior as well. So to see like an owl out in the daytime when they're nocturnal creatures, that's going to be an example that we will see reflected in our Julius Caesar book, but like animals behaving strangely. So they thought all of those things were possible clues that something was going to upset this great chain of being. Okay, so they would take those things very seriously. Let's see. Elizabethans believed in the divine rule of kings, and that is basically where the reigning monarch is God's agent, and if you're going to rebel against the king or the queen, you're rebelling against God himself. And again, to rebel against a monarch is an example of upsetting the great chain, and disastrous consequences would follow. So this is kind of here as kind of a fear tactic as well. Let's see. In England, there was a succession crisis going on. Succession, if you think of the word successor, it means who's going to come next. The succession crisis was Queen Elizabeth I, the reigning monarch, the queen, was 66 years old. She's pretty old. She was obviously nearing death, and she had no children. She refused to marry anyone, and she never named an heir. So she didn't say who should be in charge if she were to die. So this really scared people, and not too long ago in English history, there was the Bloody War of the Roses that resulted when two rival branches of the royal family were both vying for the throne, and the whole country plunged into a civil war. So they did not want to see this happen again. So they were constantly living with this fear or uncertainty of what will happen if she dies. So the fact that she was old, had no children, hadn't named an heir, would not marry, all those things kind of contributed to this succession crisis at the time. Shakespeare is not able to comment directly on his country's political situation. That would be treason. You're not allowed to just speak out against the queen or against the monarch or anything. You can't just say how you feel like people today can. So instead, he's smart, and if you went to see his plays and you were a politically aware theater goer, meaning you understood what was going on in the politics world, then you would understand how he felt about the current political situation in England. Let's see. 1599 was the year that the Globe Theater was completed, and also the year that Julius Caesar was first performed. Okay. And Julius Caesar, who lived in 1st century BC Rome, okay, was a very popular subject during Shakespeare's time. A lot of English writers saw many similarities between their own country's current political situation and the political uncertainty that faced Julius Caesar's time. Okay, so the fact that for Julius Caesar, in his time, and we're going to be talking about this when we read, he was assassinated by people he trusted, and basically he had no children, so the country plunged into a civil war after he was dead, because obviously multiple groups of people were vying for power, and it did not, it was not good for that country. So that time period, or the country, or the people who lived in that time. So very similar politically, Shakespeare's time and Julius Caesar's time. Okay, so all of these things that I just went over are just talking about the time period that Shakespeare lived in and the beliefs that they had during that time. Now, you're going to see a lot of these beliefs, okay, during, 1500, 1600 England reflected in a book about 1st century BC Rome. Totally different location, totally different time period. So you're going to kind of be on the lookout. So like the whole, animals behaving strangely belief, okay, meaning that it was going to upset the great chain of being. You're going to see that being reflected in Julius Caesar, but that was not a belief at the time that Julius Caesar lived. So just kind of keep those things in mind. All right? Bye, guys.